Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to recommend some Gothic and dark academia vibey books. On the right I have a stack of 5 books, so very briefly they're Babel by Kuang, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, Bronte's Jane Eyre, Maurier's Rebecca, and Donna Tartt's The Secret History. These books come up again and again when you search for dark academia or Gothic style novel recommendations, and for really good reason. I would say these are all fantastic desert island style novels. I don't feel like you could go wrong with them if you like this kind of book. I will also say that I really enjoy the audiobooks of Rebecca. Anna Massey reads the audiobook and she does a really good job. And Donna Tartt actually reads the audiobook of The Secret History herself. She has this beautiful southern accent and her voice is very rich, and you can tell all the love that she's thrown into The Secret History from the way that she reads it, and makes the characters so vibrant and vivid. So if you haven't read any of these, I would highly recommend. But in this video, in case you have read all of these and you're wanting more, I thought I would try and recommend some books that give me the same vibes, but I don't see maybe as often on lists like this. Some of them you do see on lists like this, I can't lie. But hopefully you'll find something new here if you've read all of these and you're looking for more of the same. I actually am going to start with 3 non-fiction books because I don't often see non-fiction books on these recommendations, and while I'm not sure a non-fiction book can strictly be dark academia or Gothic, I'm going for the vibes here. It's about the vibes. So the first one I want to recommend is The Five by Hallie Rubenhold, who is a really great social historian. This book is about the canonical victims of Jack the Ripper, so it is a take on true crime, but I think it's the kind of true crime that I would like to see more of and I would like to read more of. In this book, Rubenhold, she goes through each of the victims and she looks at the circumstances of their lives. Poverty, misogyny and patriarchy, the way that women were treated in the Victorian period. She also talks about addiction in here. And she really studies why these women ended up as victims and what contributed to them being kind of vulnerable people in Whitechapel at the time. The thing that Rubenhold says that has caused a little bit of controversy is that she concludes that not all of these women were sex workers. I think only Mary Jane Kelly, the last victim, does she find any definitive evidence that she was a sex worker. So part of the discourse that she brings in here is the way that victims of true crime were treated, and the way that sex workers in the Victorian press were degraded. There's also a podcast that she does that's a really nice companion piece to this. I listened to it on Spotify. Jack the Ripper was probably the first true crime case I was ever really interested in, and I was far too young. I think I was sort of 9, and we had a book in our house about Jack the Ripper, and it had pictures of the Dear Boss letter and things like that. And it really intrigued me. It was about the time I was getting into Sherlock Holmes too, and probably that morbid streak that exists in me was developing. But I've read on and off different books about Jack the Ripper throughout my life, and this was the first time I felt like I really came away learning something new, and I didn't feel dissatisfied with how the case was treated. So highly recommend this. I think Hallie Rubenhold is great. I think her podcast is great. I think this book is great. I wish there was more true crime available like this that really focused on the victims in this very sensitive way. Okay, I do ramble a bit about books. I will try and speed it up slightly. The next book is called Madhouse at the End of the Earth. This book was recommended to me by a TikToker, and she described it as the genre of white men doing stupid shit. And if you also enjoy that genre, this might be the book for you. This is about the Belgica. It's a ship that sailed to Antarctica in 1893? 1897. And they get stuck there, the crew, over the winter. And, madness ensues, diseases, they don't have enough food, it's dark all the time because it's polar night. Sancton, sorry, I thought his name was Scanton. Sancton really captures the kind of claustrophobic atmosphere of the ship. If you enjoyed David Grann's book, The Wager, I think you would really like this book. I really enjoyed them both. And also if you like sort of horror books set in Antarctica, those kind of cold, icy horrors. So I'm thinking of things like the start of Frankenstein, when the monster is out on the ice, or what would be another good one? The only one I can really think of is Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. But if you're looking for horror like that, maybe without the overt racist vibes, this would be a really good book for you. And I definitely recommend it. I learned a lot from this book. I really enjoyed it. And I'm actually thinking about maybe reading it again this winter. I think I have enough distance on it now that I would appreciate reading it again. And the last non-fiction book that I have is this book by Kate Summerscale called The Haunting of Alma Fielding. Kate Summerscale, I recommend all her books. She has a really good one about the Constance Kent case called The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher. But this one is actually a paranormal investigation that takes place in London in the 1930s, involving a woman called Alma Fielding who's haunted by a poltergeist in her house. And the case is investigated by a man called Nandor Fodor, who's sort of like a Harry Price-style ghost investigator. But he believes that poltergeists are psychological responses to distress. So I guess sort of almost like panic attacks or other kind of distress symptoms you might get when you're under extreme anxiety. And this case really looks at, or this book really looks at the case from lots of different angles. I think I would say Kate Summerscale is a skeptic, and she handles it in a really nuanced way. She looks at the potential psychological distress that Alma Fielding might be suffering, the potential non-haunting reasons, bad faith reasons why this might be happening. And I think she also does investigate the fact that paranormal stuff can sometimes not be explained. I quite like poltergeists and things with poltergeists in them, I suppose, but I don't really like paranormal books that are very credulous seems unkind, but from people who truly believe and don't really consider other options. And so this was the perfect book for me. If you like the Uncanny podcasts, he also did a podcast called the Battersea Poltergeist and The Witch Farm. Danny Robbins is his name. I think you would enjoy this book. This strikes me as very similar, and I kind of put them in the same box in my mind. Okay, those are the non-fictions, so on to the fictions now. Speaking of sort of being haunted in different ways, this is Beyond Black by Hilary Mantel. This is about a woman called Alison, and she's a medium, and the two figures in her life are sort of her spirit guide, who is a man, and a woman called Colette, who is kind of like her PA, but maybe also there's something sexual going on between them. This is really a novel about abuse and abusive relationships and the different ways that Alison has violence, not direct violence, but kind of indirect violence inflicted upon her. And the fascinating thing about this, I think, is that Mantel almost makes the ghostly stuff seem less scary than real-world violence to me when I read it. Alison struggles with her weight a lot. She's quite overweight when this book is taking place, and she's not happy about that. And I sympathised with her a lot as a protagonist because of that, I think. It was handled in a very sensitive way. Colette is very mean to Alison because of her being overweight, but I didn't feel like Mantel was very judgmental about that, or that sometimes you read books where the author doesn't handle it in a very sensitive way. I actually thought that she did, but I would say that if you feel funny about reading books that focus on weight, this one does touch on it a couple of times, and maybe this isn't the right book for you. But if you're looking for a more modern ghost story and kind of the terror of normality and the terror of the kind of vulnerability we all have in our lives, I would recommend Beyond Black. Mantel, anything that she writes, I would recommend. I think she was a fantastic writer. I love all her work. All right, Dark Academia. I think that The Secret History is the major reason why Dark Academia has kicked off, and it's become almost this subgenre in itself. So I would say it's the most influential Dark Academia novel that I could think of. But I don't think it's necessarily the first. And I would point to Echo's The Name of the Rose as an example of a Dark Academia novel that kind of predates The Secret History. This is set in the 12th or 13th century, and it's about two monks, one who is a young novice called Adso, he's the narrator of the novel, and his master, William of Baskerville, who's kind of a famous intellectual, almost like a Sherlock Holmes kind of figure in this medieval world. And they are sent to a monastery where a series of murders are happening. And the murders are following a kind of intellectual pattern based on some texts that are very relevant at the time that this book is set. So it's kind of closed circle murder mystery because there's only a limited number of people at this monastery who could have committed the crimes, but it's also got that academic motivating force behind it. This is very heavy on the academic, like all of Echo's work. I would say it's the most accessible of Echo's works that I've tried to read in quite a few cases. But don't read this if you're not in the mood for something that's going to talk about Aristotle and quote some Latin at you. If you are in the mood, this is going to be perfect. If you're in the mood for something that's a bit more digestible, I don't think that would be the right time to read this. That would be my only thing I would say about it. But other than that, I think this is a fabulous novel. I think all of these are fabulous novels, and I'm probably like a broken record saying it again and again. But I definitely would recommend this. If you like The Secret History, I do think you would like this. If you like the dark vibes of the Ninth House, I think you would probably like this too. I would give it a try. And then I guess I just like novels that are set in monasteries and convents. This book is Matrix by Lauren Groff. I tried to read a Lauren Groff book before this, The Fates and the Furies, and I didn't finish it. I stopped reading it, which I don't usually do that, so it's a sign that I'm really not enjoying a book. And I probably picked this one up because it was buy one get one half price, and I really liked the idea that it was set in a convent in the medieval world, and so that sort of pushed me over the edge. And I'm so glad I did. This is such a fantastic book. This is about Marie de France, who wrote her Leigh poems, but it's about her life. She ends up being a prioress in an abbey in England, but we start at the beginning and we go all the way through to the end of her life. And I think this is really a book about freedom. There are so many pressures that are exerted on her. She's not stereotypically beautiful and she really feels it. She is forced into this convent where she doesn't necessarily want to be. She is bound by the rules of the convent once she's in it. She just really oppressed in lots of ways. I mean, she's a woman at a time when it was difficult to be a woman, or more difficult than it is now. And yet in her life, she manages to find freedom in different ways. And there's a lot of imagery of birds here and cages, I guess similar to the idea of her being cloistered, and birds let free. And some of the prose in this I found incredibly moving, and the final pages, it really, really moved me. And if you liked The Name of the Rose, I would recommend this. If you like books about writers and authors, autobiographical style books, I would recommend it. I don't normally tab, but I actually did tab this book because there were so many bits, and I commonplaced pretty much all of them because I was just so blown away by how beautiful it was. I would like to read more Lauren Groff, actually. Maybe I will try Florida, her short story collection. I saw, if you follow Taylor Swift and Florence and the Machine, on Taylor Swift's recent album, they did a song together called Florida. And Florence from Florence and the Machine said Lauren Groff's short story collection, Florida, was an influence behind that song. So I might try that. But if you do have any recommendations from her, I would like to try more of her. Because this one was fantastic and the other one I really didn't like, so I need to see where I stand on it. Next up are kind of two books at the same time, so let me make sure that, yeah. All right. The one I'm really recommending is M.R. James' Ghost Stories. I know that classic books are recommended in these videos. I often see Dracula and Dorian Gray, Frankenstein. But I feel like M.R. James, if you like those kinds of books, and also if you like academic settings, you will enjoy M.R. James. I feel safe saying that. These stories are all about academics whose curiosity leads them astray. And there's lots of dark academia vibes, and they are ghost stories, so there's also scary vibes. And his prose I find to be incredibly rich, and he really does tell stories incredibly well. I do like A Whistle and I Will Come to You, My Lad, which is probably one of his most famous. I would say that my favourite is the Mezzotint, which is about a kind of... it's about a picture. I won't say any more than that. If you like M.R. James, I recommend this Philip Pullman story, The Collectors. I would say this is definitely inspired by the Mezzotint. It's very short, but definitely worth it. And I have this nice edition with little lino cuts. Very atmospheric. So I wanted to pop in a mention of that while I was on it. But M.R. James is the real recommendation here. Okay, I have two more books that I'm going to show. The first one is another well-loved. Look, I lost the corner at one point when it was in my bag. And you can see from the spine, I mean, this one has been done to death. Any Sarah Waters book could be on this list. The Little Stranger was the one that was in contention with this, but I ended up picking Affinity because I see it floating around less, and I think this is a criminally underrated book that Sarah Waters has written. All Sarah Waters novels focus on lesbian relationships, often in the Victorian period, and the difficulties of navigating female sexuality during that time. This book is about a young woman who is a lesbian. Her family know, and they are trying to repress her. And in some senses, she's trying to repress herself because of the social climate at the time. And she's become quite mentally ill because of the various stresses in her life. It's left open to your interpretation the degree to which she's become mentally ill, right? She could just be depressed and anxious, which would be understandable in her situation, or she could be actually quite disconnected from reality. She's an unreliable narrator, so if you like that in Rebecca, this would be a good one. She goes to visit a prison for some kind of charitable work, and she meets a medium called Selina, who she's very drawn to. And again, there's no answers in this book, I would say. You can read it a different way every single time. But she develops a relationship with Selina. Of all the books I've recommended, perhaps this is the one that I would recommend the most highly. This is the one that I've had the most fun with. And as you can see, I mean, I've read it again and again and again. I want to read it now as soon as I stop filming. This is such a good ghost, psychological, unreliable narrator, thriller type book. It's perfect. And my last recommendation, I actually recently got this really super nice edition. I didn't need it because I owned all the things that were in it, but I saw it and I wanted it, so I got it. This is Susan Hill, The Woman in Black, plus this is a bind up with her other ghost stories. I feel like Susan Hill is just not talked about, and I really love her. I love her detective series, her Simon Serialis series, and I also really love her fiction. Her ghost stories are probably the most terrifying ghost stories I've ever read. The Woman in Black, if you haven't read it, it's so chilling and so creepy. It's about a young solicitor called Arthur who travels to a place called Eelmarsh House because a client, Mrs. Drablow, has died, and he is going to settle her affairs for her, for his firm. It begins, like many good ghost stories, it begins on Christmas Eve. So if you're looking for something creepy, like A Christmas Carol to read over the holiday period, this might be the one for you. I really love this book. Maybe it's because, I read it in school for the first time, and I feel like when you read things in school for the first time, it's a bit hit and miss. I still, despite really liking Dickens, I still can't get on with Great Expectations, and I think maybe it's because I read it in school and couldn't stand it then. So maybe it's that. Maybe that's why people just aren't that into it. Or maybe I'm wrong and actually people really are into Susan Hill and I'm just, not up to scratch with my literary climate. I would also recommend this story, The Man in the Picture. I'm noticing in this video that I obviously like stories about haunted pictures. But yeah, The Man in the Picture is also, all of these are terrifying. She writes really, really creepy stuff. So if you're looking for something scary and gothic-y while it gets closer to Halloween or closer to Christmas, Susan Hill, I would put her up there. Okay, I'm sure that I've rattled on quite a lot. When it comes to books, I can't help myself. I love them. I hope that there were a couple of new recommendations for you here. I hope that you enjoy them. Please, please, please let me know your recommendations in the comment box below. Especially Lauren Groff recommendations about monks and nuns as well. I would really like that. Anything about monasteries or cloisters, I obviously really enjoy. I will do more book videos over time. I could have added so many more to this list. So if you are looking for a couple more recommendations, I certainly can give them. And I also think I will do a video maybe on fairy tale inspired books that I'm enjoying. So not really mythic retellings, but fairy tale retellings. I've got a couple of books that I would like to talk about for that. So that might be the next book video that I do, unless there are strong objections. If you like this video, please give it a like so that I know it's something to make more of. I'm just starting out, so it's kind of difficult to feel out what people want to listen to and what people are looking for. And I will see you next time, probably with something stationery related, and then more book videos in the future. Bye!